Today on the podcast, we are back in South Central Pennsylvania with a longtime coach and an athlete who's been through it all with an amazing coaching record and a lot of different athletes. Welcome today on the podcast,
Oh, thank you.
Coach Harrington.
Yes.
Yeah, Art, let's go back to the very beginnings for you as a competitive athlete. What was that role in your life as you began your first sports activities?
I went to Williamsport High School and in late 50s and was on the track team, and I was a pole vaulter. We had some incredibly good teams when I was at Williamsport, and we had a coach, Dr. Jameson, who was literally years and years and years ahead of his time, the best coach I ever had. He was doing things back in the 50s with interval training and things like that. I remember he told me, because he knew I wanted to be a coach and someday. He told me the first book you should read is Doc Councilman's book on interval training. And Councilman was the swimming coach at the University of Indiana. They had a dynasty in those years. He did a lot of experimenting with interval training. Doc Jameson, my coach, was able to somehow make this apropos to track and field too. That just started my interest in not only as a competitor, but knowing that I wanted to be a coach.
What kind of body type or what kind of person becomes a pole vaulter in the 1950s?
Pretty crazy. It was a lot different. The emphasis was more on strength and just gymnastics ability, because Sweeney's steel poles that I used didn't bend, I'll tell you that. And they certainly didn't give any energy in return.
What was the landing? What was the landing area for
sawdust? So it was a little rough. You landed on your feet, and then you just fell back into this. It sort of sat back into the sawdust.
I guess you hope you landed on your feet. Did you have other teammates, or how many pole vaulters were there on your high school?
3.
Wow. That's pretty impressive. What was your best high school accomplishments in the pole vault?
Just 12.9 in high school, which was a pretty good jump in those days for an aluminum pole or Swedish steel pole.
Did you compete outside of Williamsport? What was the travel like? How many meets was there? The state championship or regional championships going on?
We competed in the Central Penn League with Harrisburg, York, Reading, Lebanon at that time. That was our league that we competed in. And we were District 4 in the district competition.
How did you do ever at district?
I did okay. It was runner-up once a year, but we had a great team. We really dominated that area for a long time. In fact, our 4x1 team tied the national high school record at the Penn Relays, 41-1. The odd part about that is the leadoff runner actually coming out of the blocks lost the baton in the air. It flew up in the air, and he caught him in midair. Never missed a step.
That is too bad. I bet there's no photo of that. That would
No, I'm sure there's not. No.
Nobody expects anything to happen at the gun of the 4x1. What made you already think you wanted to be a coach at that age?
I just loved all the dynamics of track and field. I loved the physics of the events. I would try everything just to try to learn it. I just had a great interest in track. What really got me interested in track, when I was in junior high school, they were chasing the 4-minute mile. And it was Bannister and Australia and Cunningham and all these guys. And I remember reading an article where a doctor had said it's impossible for a man to break 4 minutes in a mile because his heart might burst. Can you imagine that? But that was fascinating to me, because it was, for me in my lifetime, it was the greatest barrier in track and field. More than the 16-foot vault or the 7-foot high jump, the 4-minute mile was just something special. I remember just following that. Was it going to be Landry? Was it going to be Bannister? Was it going to be Cunningham? They were all down around 401, 402. It just fascinated me. Then I read, I think 57, Bannister running in a dual meet on a cinder track in a rainstorm. It broke the 4-minute mile in a dual meet between Cambridge and Oxford. The ironic thing is, my wife, who was a teacher, that's a sacred track, a sacred part of place in track and field. I went with her. And I'm running. What I didn't realize was that Oxford University isn't one school, it's 50 schools all wrapped up into one. And I could not find the track for the life of me. I finally found a groundskeeper one day. We were at Worcester College and I was out running on the fields. I asked the groundskeeper where the track was that Roger Bannister broke 4 minutes on. He said, well, that's at St. John's College. Told me how to get there. So I go up there and I go through the building and I go out on the track. It's an artificial track, a rubber track. I went, oh my God, what did they do? I went inside and I said to the lady, you cover up this holy ground. But I did get a chance to run on the track. Anyhow, when I went in, she said, would you like to meet him? I said, yeah. She said, he's the dean of men at I think it was St. Mary's College, one of the 50. She said, I'll call up and make an appointment for you. So she called up and I heard her on the phone. I heard her say, oh, no, that's just too bad. Here he was gone. He was away for the week on some kind of a work study thing or something. And I never did get a chance to meet him. But I did get to Oxford. I did get to run on the track. But that is what got me interested in track and field.
That's fantastic. I hope somebody took a jar full of the cinders and kept those somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's probably still some in Bannister shoes.
In fact, Art Morris, who was the mayor of Lancaster at one time, it was a runner at Penn State at Lancaster High School and was a state champion a mile. He was also a big fan of Bannister's and he went over. He's from London originally. And he went over when they auctioned off Bannister shoes. But he said it got a little bit too steep for him. He said, I stayed in it to $1,000 and then I had to drop out.
Yeah.
Art and I were talking not so long ago, and we were talking about, I had mentioned to him that in the Nike Outdoor Championships, high school championships last year, the first 4 high school boys broke 4 minutes. And I saw them interview one kid, and in the interviewer said, how does it feel to break the 4-minute barrier? And the kid looked at him and said, it's not a barrier. He said, it's just a time. It's not a barrier anymore. Art and I were talking about that. And Art said, I would like to give money to somebody that comes, runs on a cinder track in a rainstorm, in the same shoes that he wore, the same track surface that he wore. He said, I'd give $100 to anybody that could break 4 minutes under those conditions. Yeah, things have changed, that's for sure.
That's interesting. Yeah, let's have a retro track meet with the steel pole on the vault and sawdust landing.
Oh, yeah.
No, not anybody to participate in that.
Not many.
What about the world of local track then when you were in high school? You were able to find out what was going on with the chase for the 4-minute mile. What about the press coverage and what about the public's awareness of track and comparing it to the football team? You had a really successful team. So what was the status of track and field there?
It never attained the status of football or anything like that, but it was well respected in Williamsport because of the history and because of Doc Jameson and because we always had such a good team. There was some following. We did have some support from some of the other coaches, football coaches, Tom Vargo at the time. He wanted his boys to run track. No weight training in that time, oddly enough. In fact, our coaches told us definitely do not lift weights because you'll get muscle bound. The old theories on that, watching the bodybuilders and everything like that, they told us not to lift weights. I think that has been one of the biggest changes in track and field throughout the years has been the strength training and how important it is to every event, no matter what event you're in. When I was coaching at Solanco, running distance and cross country, we went into weight rooms just as much as the football team did. Back in those days, they did not want you to lift weights. But track did have a certain appeal in Williamsport. I was lucky.
That winning record brings some level of expectation. How competitive were you and how driving was the competition within the team and with the teams that you guys were beating all the time?
Within the team, there wasn't a great deal of contact with the pole vault because we didn't attract that many guys, but we had a lot of really great throwers. And obviously with Ray Moore and some of his compatriots, some great sprinters. I think it was more, let's say, inner competition among the athletes, and there was a lot of very good ones. It was the history and the tradition and trying to live up to that. It went way back into the 40s in Williamsport, and I think everybody that participated in the track in Williamsport at that time wanted to maintain that.
Doc Ray Moore, he ended up winning assistant coach of the year at the university level. Was he an actual teammate of yours? Were you on the same team at the same time?
Yeah, he was a senior when I was a freshman
And he tripled 100, 200, 400,
in the 400. Yes.
420, 440. And
Yes. In those
and
days. Yeah.
yeah, and then on to Villanova, a great career and a great career as a coach at Indiana University, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Great. What was your plan then in high school for going to college? What did you see as your future and how did you manage to get to college?
I went to school for art because I was an art teacher. It wasn't really track. We just go in space, especially I went to Kutztown University and they didn't really have a track team. We had some guys that participated, but we really didn't have a team or anything like that. I went to school for art, but not necessarily track.
Did you pole vault there?
Yes.
Oh, so you got to pole vault there. And was there any coaching? Still sawdust?
There was very little coaching, but lucky for me, I had a teammate, Roy Semmel, who was his name, and he was from the Lehigh Valley area. He used a fiberglass pole. Ulysses broke the world record. The world record went up just a little bit more than a half an inch in 25 years. And in one day, he jumped 16 feet. But Semmel had gone to a camp or had gone down there someplace and had trained with him and talked to him, and he knew how to use the fiberglass pole, the difference in a completely different technique, completely different. And he was able to give me some hints on it. But our coach didn't know anything about it, but nobody did. Nobody knew much about the fiberglass pole at all, except Ulysses and a couple other vaulters that had tried it.
What was your best accomplishment?
Just being on the team. Nothing special, no.
What year did you graduate Kutztown? What was the world like there for employment and what was the world like in general?
Graduated in 65. A teacher could get a job at the drop of a hat. They needed teachers so bad that I had so many offers. I actually taught a year before I graduated. They needed teachers so bad in Williamsport, back in my home district in the junior high. They said, we'll hire you and we'll get an emergency certificate. And if you will go back to school this summer and then graduate, which I did. But I had already taught a year because teaching was just in such high demand at that time. I taught a year in Williamsport, and then when I did go back and graduate, then I went to Bradford, Pennsylvania, up in District 9.
Oh, close to Erie.
Close to Erie, yes.
Okay.
And that was a different world, too.
Pretty brutal weather.
Oh, awesome. Awful. That's why I ended up at Solanco. My roommate up there in in Bradford was from Penn Manor. He went to Penn Manor High School. And I came down to visit him a couple times. And again, still very interested in art, but now really interested in coaching. I had some great athletes when I was in Bradford. In fact, I coached the first boy that vaulted 14 feet in Pennsylvania. And he was a 2-time state champion from Bradford. But when I came down to weather, the last year I coached in Bradford, the last year I coached track, May the 5th, we had the league meet or the county meet on our track. And I had to go early and shovel snow off the runways. And I thought, this is it. That year in cross country, we ran the district championship at Du Bois on a golf course. 10 inches of snow. And that's when we were still running 2 miles and for cross country. And I think the winning time was like 25 minutes. And it was it's a kid named Don Cherry from Du Bois, and my kid was second. And I think he fell literally 30 times because he'd be running along. He said, Coach, I would run along, all of a sudden, boom, I'd be down, I'd be in a sand trap or something. But I never saw anything between the 14 inches of snow in district cross country and shoveled the snow out the runways and track. I thought, you know what? I got to get out of here. I came down here not only for track, but for art, because it was near Philadelphia, near New York, and near DC, some of the big major art museums in the world. And in fact, I was not even hired to be a track coach or cross country coach. And I got them by de facto when I was there. The coaches resigned.
Let me ask you about getting the job at Bradford.
Yes.
When you arrived, did you take the coaching jobs right away for track and cross?
I was
Okay.
an assistant in track. They had a guy already there that was coaching track, and he actually came to me and said, "Look, I know you have a track background. Would you be interested in being an assistant?" Especially, he needed a jumping coach. That's what I more or less specialized in. So I did for a year. I coached. I was an assistant in track, and then I became the head cross country coach the next year. And when that coach moved on, he left the district. So I took the cross country job.
How good was that pole vaulter when you met him, and how much influence were you as a coach on him?
He was pretty good. In fact, there's an interesting story about Bradford. When I first came to Bradford, I was driving around in my car and I saw all these houses with these big pile of mattresses in the backyard. So finally I asked one of my kids, I said, what are all these mattresses in everybody's backyard? He said, "Coach, they're pole vaulting pits." And I said, "Why? What do you mean?" He said, "Look," and that was the days oil was so plentiful in Bradford. People had oil pumps in their backyard. And they had a hickory stick that went down into the ground and it pumped up and down. And after a while, it would get soaked with oil. So you could bend it and it wouldn't break. All these kids were pole vaulting. It was like a major thing. I thought, oh my God, I've died and gone to heaven. All these kids. So a lot of them came to me. They didn't know all the specifics and they stiff vaulted the way we did it in those days. But the boy that I coached that was so good, he was already good when I got there. He was decent. I like to say, because I did change his technique. And because then I started to learn more and more about the fiberglass vaulting. And I was changing him. The biggest change was in the old steel pole, you slid your hands together. When you planted the pole, you slid your bottom hand up to the top hand and you just swung up on the pole. But in the fiberglass vaulting, you kept your hands apart. What I used to do with him is I would take socks onto the pole. I would take socks, I'd wrap the socks around the pole, then I'd wrap tape around it, one right below his top hand and one right above his bottom hand. He couldn't slide his hands together. That's how I got the point across, so that you had to have your hands apart. You weren't trying to rock back quite as far, quite as hard. But he adapted to it because he was a tremendous athlete. In track, he was the best athlete I had in every event except the 3 throws. He was the best 100-yard dance man. He was the best 2-miler. And he was the best high jumper, the best long jumper, the best pole vaulter. He was just a tremendous athlete. In fact, he got a full ride to Ohio State. And he vaulted 16 feet when the world record was 16.6. So he did very well there. And I think up until just a few years ago, he was a track coach out in Washington State. But I inherited, I was lucky because he had some basic concepts and he loved the event. And with some working, but we worked very hard at those changes because it's very different. But he did adapt to it and ended up doing real well. So I will say the old Browning fiberglass poles in those days, they didn't bend a whole lot and they didn't bend very easy either. It was very much still like evolving with the old aluminum poles or the Swedish steel poles.
That's an amazing thing to learn about, that it was the oil on the pump drills and the pumps
And
that they made in pole vaulting of interest locally. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's literally almost every yard had a pile of mattresses in the backyard. And they just dug a hole in the ground for them to plant the pole. They didn't have any the vaulting boxes or anything like that. They just had a hole in the ground that they would put it in.
When you then went back to Solanco and circumstances let you get back into coaching, what was your interest level? I'm sure you enjoyed coaching cross country and track, but how did they compare for you? And what happened in the middle season? What were you doing in
Indoor track? I really started the indoor program at Solanco. And really, basically, Terry Engelman, who was a track coach at Alpharetta High School at that time, he had the first artificial track in Lancaster County. And we used to hold meets in the wintertime at his outdoor track. And then we used to we went everywhere. We went up to New York a couple times a year to the Cardinal Hayes games in the old Armory, which isn't the Armory today, believe me. It was a lot different then. we would go up there, and we initiated indoor track in Lancaster County, and then it spread a little bit. When I first started coaching, my main interest was track. By the end of my coaching career, I really loved cross country. I loved the sport. I loved working with distance runners. There was just a different camaraderie. There was something about cross country that was special. I really was drawn to cross country, smaller team where you had a more intimate relationship with the kids. With track, I was always somewhere because I always tried to learn everything, even from high school up. When I would go to practice, I'd always end up going over with the hurdlers at the end of my practice, or I'd go over with the throwers. I had just learned as much as I could. And I went to every clinic possible, every clinic that was wherever it was, I went, trying to just to round out my knowledge about track and field. Really, in those days, in indoor, I had no assistant coaches. I coached every event. It was like a three-ring circus. Certain days I meet with the pole vaulters or the jumpers, and certain days I meet with the throwers, and certain days I meet with the distance runners. I got very good at time management, that's for sure. But I used my captains a lot. In fact, I never had kids vote for captains. I always appointed captains. And I appointed kids that I thought would have an influence on, and they weren't always the best kids, but they were a lot of the times the most reliable, or they were students of the sport or whatever. I would give them let's say if it was a day I was out on the road, I might be 10 miles from the school with the distance runners. The captain was back there running the practice for whatever the hurdlers were doing that day, or the sprinters were doing that day. I learned just how to delegate, but I used a lot of the captains to help me, and then I tried to spend as much time with each group as I could.
Let me ask you then about the early days in cross country. What was the interval workout schedule? How many times a week were you running intervals in those early days when you?
Yeah, I see. And once again, I had a great interval background because of Doc Amison and reading Doc Counselin's book. I think the standard interval in those times was 10-400s or 10-440s. That was what everybody did. That was okay, this is what we're going to do for intervals. But plus, we did halves, we did mile repeats and stuff like that. When I was in Bradford, it was great because we only had one meet a week. We were in what was called then the New York, Pennsylvania League, and it's like what they do now in the Lancaster Lebanon League. We would have a meet. There might be 50 schools in that meet from Pennsylvania and in New York, say, like southern New York. And it was like almost like a mini invitational every meet. And then you got scored separately with each school. But it was nice only having one meet a week because you could train better. When I first came to Solanco, it was not good. We had 3 dual meets a week. You really had to race yourself into shape. If you had a Saturday meet, that added another one if you had an invitational somewhere. But you really couldn't train. And the coaches, we complained and complained. Finally, toward the end of my coaching at Solanco, they went to 2 meets a week. And then we could do 1 day a week. We could do interval training. It was really rough with all the meets. But when we had all those meets, I didn't really do any interval training. It was the interval, but I used the meets as workouts. We'd go in there and have a plan. And sometimes we ran a few intervals after the meets, especially if it was an easy meet. I remember one time coming home from one of the meets when I was in Bradford, I was not very happy. So the bus pulled up in front of the school, and I got out the bus, and I said, okay, you guys, before you go in the locker room, go down on the track because we're going to do a little running. We did 10-400s. Yeah.
Great.
It's a little crazy in those days.
Yeah. How did you fund that travel to New York and around? What was the budgets and availability for that?
It was good. I mean, we had no problems. But now, you got to remember, in Bradford's 4 miles from the New York border. Yeah. So I was traveling a lot further. In track, we were going down to Du Bois or State College or Punxsutawney or out to Erie to Northeast or places like that. The trips were much longer in track. But in cross country, the New York schools were close. Otto Eldred or Olean, they were only a few miles away. But in track, it's really odd because when I came to, I was used to going from Bradford to Du Bois or 90 miles or something like that for a dual meet. With Solanco, when we had to go from Corryville to Effort or Calico, the kids would say, oh man, we have the way we did it so far, coach. It's just so far. We got to go all the way to Calico. I said, oh my God. You have to go all the way to Cocalico. It's 10 miles.
What year did you get to Solanco to start coaching?
I came to Solanco in 70, 69, 70.
Okay. So,
1970 was my first full year at Solanco.
all right. The PIAA's cross country was then being run still at Penn State.
Penn State, yes,
Right.
on the golf course there. The blue or white course.
I ran against you. I was from a Class B school, Richland, Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Went with Weimer ran,
Oh, yes, yes, yeah.
which wasn't really good for me because it wasn't good for anybody.
Yeah, Cliff and Glenn, his brother, they were both state champs.
What was your earliest experiences at the state cross country and track championships of PIAA's from Solanco?
Was Solanco?
Yes.
Okay, it would have been 70, 72 or 3 for cross, and 70, yeah, early 72 for track when I had some kids qualify for the state meet.
What I wanted to ask about was your growing community with the coaches of Pennsylvania through that time.
Yes.
Of course, we cooperate and get to know the local coaches in each town. And then how was that communication happening in preparation for the meets? And what were the coaches doing, cooperating and communicating in those early days of the 70s?
I don't think there was a lot of, we didn't call each other and tell what our times were, that's for sure, or anything like that. But the coaching fraternity was very close. Once again, especially in cross. But in track, I was the president of the Pennsylvania Track and Field Coaches Association for years. After Bob Shout, who was a longtime coach at Norristown, I followed him. At that time, there was a big separation between Eastern Pennsylvania and Western Pennsylvania. And the Eastern coaches really had it because they had an indoor program. They had indoor facilities, and all the power was in the eastern part of the state, or District 7. The Whitfield League was very good in track too. But there was just a dominant kind of a thing with the Philadelphia area coaches. So what I tried to do when I was the president was try to bring both sides together. And one of the things I did was I moved the indoor state meet to Bucknell to try to get it more in the middle of the state. This is before State College had their great facility. They used to have the indoor state meet at Lehigh, which is really far. It's in the east. I moved it. And what I did then is I had a coaching clinic. I invited the coaches that I had been acquainted with that were high school coaches in Pennsylvania, with the exception of Al Cantello. It was from Norristown. He was from Pennsylvania, and at that time he was a coach at the Naval Academy. We had a clinic every year, and if I knew a coach that had a lot of success, let's say in high jumpers, or had a lot of success in hurdlers, then I invited them to be the clinicians, the speakers. And I didn't charge anything. And I started out, we had it in State College, and I went to Brooks, which was manufactured in Kutztown. And I went to them and asked them to sponsor it. And they did. They sponsored the whole thing for us. But what I tried to do was just expand track and field and explain the knowledge of track and field with the use of the homegrown talent, more or less, the Pennsylvania track and field guys. So that helped a lot. Now there's a lot of camaraderie there in track. And schools that like when we were in AA, with Solanco was in AA, in the district, our main competition was Annville Cleona, which had some great teams in Exeter and Conrad Weiser. They're all AAA schools now. But when I was coaching at Solanco, AA was much better than AAA in track and in cross country because the power was in Solanco and Annville, Cleona, and Exeter and Conrad Weiser. Those schools really were much better than a lot of the AAA schools at that time. But then over time, a lot of those school districts got bigger, merged with other districts, and then now the AA schools and districts around here aren't very strong anymore.
I think the 73 AA champ cross country was Annville Cleona.
Yes. Bob Stackow,
yeah. I know his brother really well now. We're in the Ash House Harriers together. But
oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We ran Anvil, Cleone, and Columbia High School was up on a big hill. That's when I had Cliff and Cliff Weimer and Glenn. But Cliff ran against Stackhouse. And Cliff would just get ahead of him by 10 yards or so going up that hill. But coming down the hill, Stackhouse, who was about 6'3", big kid, he would just go right by Cliff. He would work his butt off going up. Unfortunately, meat ended with going down the hill. So he ended up beating Cliff. But that year in track was Cliff's junior year, and Stackhouse was hurt. And he was only going to run the 2-mile relay in the district meet. He could not run the mile. He could not run the 2-mile. And I said to Cliff, I tell you, Cliff, there is nobody in this state except Bob Stackhouse that can beat you. And he's not running. I said, this might be a year if you want to try the double, to run the mile and the 2-mile. This might be a year to do it. And he did. And he won them both because there was nobody else in the state at that time. He had run 9:06 that indoor season, and he was just, he was ready to go. And he did. Then his senior year, I said to him, now, Stackhouse had graduated, so he wasn't there anymore. But I knew the kid from Youngsville. And I said to Cliff, you're ready to break 9 minutes in a 2-mile. I said, I think you can do it easily. Not easily, but I think you can break 9 minutes. I said, I would not defend both titles. I would try to run under 9 minutes. That would be a greater accomplishment. And boy, he resisted me with everything. But he wanted to run the mile, and Cliff had never lost in those meets. And sure enough, this kid from Youngsville beat him in the mile. Just outkicked him because Cliff wasn't a kicker. He could run 2:02 all out. That was it. And this kid had run 1:56, and so Cliff lost, and it just blew his mind. And he ended up losing the 2-mile too, without question. He was so much better. In fact, I thought his teammate Tommy Barron should have probably won the 2-mile because he had run faster in the district meet than the kid ran to win the 2-mile in the state meet. But it was that old pecking order. As Cliff slowed down, so did Tom. And then Cliff kept slowing down because his head was out of it. And Tom kept slowing down because he figured, okay, I'm supposed to be this far behind Cliff, and I'm sure still not supposed to beat him.
Wow. Well, so was that a story you used with kids after that when they resisted your strategic selection of races?
Oh, yeah. And I brought that up a lot. But once again, then I never had a distance runner as good as Cliff again.
Yeah.
You know,
a teammate of mine, really good friend, Jim Lambert, finished second in 1975 at the state championship cross.
Uh-huh.
He was second behind Cliff, I think, that year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we had a great team that year. We beat, so I think State College won the AAA that year, if I remember. They had Eric Combo. And we beat them 3 times that year. We beat them at their own invitational. We beat them. And we beat them at our invitational. And Cliff beat Hobo every time he ran against me. I said, I know. When we ended up losing the state meet that year to the Shannock by 1 point. And we had trounced the Shannock. Earlier in the year, we won the Spike Shoe meet that was the invitational up at Penn State. They invited some of the best schools from the whole East Coast. And we won it fairly easily, and Cliff won it individually. But we had a great team that year. So I figured, even though we didn't win the state meet, I thought we were the best team in the state that year because we had beaten State College 3 times.
Wow.
This was a long time ago before all the cross-country camps and everything. Now you can go to all these colleges. We went to cross-country camp. We camped in tents. And we would go to a different state park every year. This year we went to Pole Valley, which is out around State College, right at the top of 7 mountains there. What we would do, I would call high school that I knew in the area that was good before we went and see if we could scrimmage or work out with them or something like that. So we went in and we scrimmaged State College on their course. Then afterwards, we did a workout with them. We did that every year. We got up Wednesday morning, we'd get up, run 15 miles. And funny story, that year I had read something somewhere about one of the things that is really good for distance runners was defizzed Coke because it had sugar in it and it helped you recover. So at the first aid station, I had all this defizzed Coke out on the table and everybody came by and got one. We were running 15 miles. So I got back after they went through, and I waited a few minutes, and I got back in the van, and I drove up the road, and here's every one of them standing, leaning over with their hands on their knees, and they were all throwing up. Every one of them. One of my assistant coaches was along, and he said, "Damn you, Harrington." He said, "What did you do to us?"
Right.
I said, "I'll never do that again." But it was like a good old water.
Who was the coach at
Horner.
State College?
Yeah, Jack Horner,
Yeah. Right.
the bench coach, and Steve. Oh, I'm trying to think. It was the girls' coach.
Yeah.
Steve, he ran there.
Gar with a G.
Yes, Steve. Oh goodness, I can't think of his name so well.
Yeah.
But he was the girls' coach, and in the in the '80s, we became big rivals, and I started to have some really good girls' teams.
I want to talk
And,
about the transit. When did girls track start, and what was the beginning of that all about?
Girls' track actually started when I first came to Solanco. They had a few girls out, and I guess it was a team. They did have some meets, but it wasn't really anything. In 1980, I resigned at Solanco, and I went to F&M as an assistant with Bill Iannicelli. And it didn't take me long to realize I belonged in high school, because the thing that I really liked about coaching was the teaching aspect of coaching. Taking somebody that never pole vaulted or never high jumped or never long jumped and teaching them how to do that. That was what I really enjoyed about coaching. And you didn't do that. In college was more recruiting. You did coach, but not to the same level. I went back to the high school in '84, and they asked me if I would take both programs then, the men's and women's. And we only had one track. And, I said, you know what, if I take both, I'll be able to really make sure that I can equalize everything, then it won't be, all the girls will be on the track when we want to get on or whatever, So I took both programs, and that's when I started girls cross country. I had a really good girl that ran but she ran with the boys. And she would run like in the JV or the meets with the boys, and she was very good. In fact, she was second at states to a girl from Camp Hill. I'm trying to think of her name, who was the Georgia state champ before she moved up here. And she was a great runner. Ann was good. Ann finished second to her at states. But Ann's claim to fame is she beat Kim Gallagher.
Really?
And in an AAU half-mile race at Millersville, Kim Gallagher comes with the Ambler Track Club. And it's an AAU race, and Ann Schweiger is there. And Ann's in cut-off jeans and an old T-shirt. And Kim Gallagher comes out with medals all over her, pins all over her from all the meets. And Hickey, who was the coach in the Ambler Track Club, said she's never lost a race. Never lost a race. And she said ever since she's been like 6 years old, she's won every race she's ever entered anywhere in the country. And her and Ann Schweiger came on the track together, and Ann Schweiger just tore her a new one. She must have beat her by 30 yards. And Hickey went bananas. Who is this girl? Who is this girl? Who is this girl? So she ran, but we didn't have a team. So then I started cross country then, girls cross country.
How was the difference you found at the beginning, coaching girls and coaching boys? Was there a transition for the girls' psyche and competition?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I learned a lot, believe me. I remember the first day that I met with them, I said, you're going to do everything the boys do, maybe a different time or a different number, but you're going to do the same thing. I said, and don't cry. Because I said, if you cry, it's not going to work, because I have a daughter and a wife, and I crying is just crying. I said, so don't cry. If you don't want to work, you better not come out for girls cross country, because you're going to work. And they give all the credit to them. They did it. They did everything that I asked them to do. And the very first year we had cross country, we won 16 meets. Again, right place at the right time. I was so lucky because in the 70s, I had the greatest boys in track and in cross country. In track, we had some great guys and great jumpers. Oh my God. We had some Titanic meets with McCaskey. One year in the triple jump, in a dual meet, I had a kid triple jump 46 feet and did not place. He was fourth in a dual meet, 46 feet. A lot of times that wins a medal in the state meet.
couple other transition things happened there in the 70s. I just want to get your take on. Were you in the mid 70s president of the Coaches Track Association?
Yes.
The first thing that
Mid
moved
to
the
late. Yeah.
state championships was the track. I think it was 1976. The track moved from Beaver Stadium to Shippensburg. Was that
Gibbonsburg. Yep. Yep.
what was involved and how long was the planning for that switch? Do you remember anything about that?
Yeah. Not specifically as far as the PIE, the logistics of all that. I don't know any of that. I just know that they redid the facility and they got rid of the track so that they could get more people in the stands for football. But actually, I was sad at first because it was a tradition. When I was in high school, we went to Penn State. It was just a tradition. It really worked out well at Ship. It really did. You could live there, the campus, and the facility were good at that time, and they're even better now. But it worked out really well. It really did.
And then the cross country course moved also.
Yes.
And do you remember how much warning would you just say, oh, would they announce next year's not going to be here? Do you have any? Do you remember how any of that stuff?
I don't remember a lot of warning. No, I just remember getting a notification from the PIAA that we're going to the cross country championships are now going to be at instead of State College or Penn State. No, I don't ever remember a whole lot of warning or anything like that.
Let me ask you about one more transition. We went from 2 miles to 2.5 miles by the mid 70s. And what about those changes? Was that all just a PIAA decision? Nothing to do with the coaches consulted about that?
Yes. No, I don't. I do not remember being consulted at all about that. I think that was a PIAA decision. I think over the years, the high schools have tried to come a little bit closer to what the colleges do, and which is a good thing. I was president of the coaching association at the time. I don't remember hearing anything. The Pennsylvania track and field coaches at that time, our big fight was to have regional track meets because we felt that going to the state meet, and especially for distance runners, it was too hard to double and you couldn't do things. And now, and I say this because I coached in District 3. I also coached in District 9. And I always know, and we always said, look, you could finish 6th in District 1 and be better than the winner in District 11 or District 9 or whatever. And we thought a fair way to get the best kids to the state championship was to have a regional meet. Eastern Pennsylvania and Western Pennsylvania had their own meet. And then the winners from the top 2 or however many from the Eastern region and the Western region would meet. And it would be a truce. We thought that, and we tried for years to get that, to try to protect District 1, 3, and 7. Basically, yeah. That's what we tried to do. Because 1, 3, and 7 were getting the shit in those times because we have guys that were placing 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and they were better than winning teams in some. And I was one of those because I coached in District 9 in Bradford, and that was one of the weaker districts. And even those first years I was there, I took kids to states that wouldn't have made it if they were at Solanco or at McCaskey or someplace like that.
Well, how did you transition out of coaching then?
You coached after.
Yeah, it was hard. I did a little volunteer coaching for some of my friends. Art Morris became the coach at Conestoga Valley. And he asked me if I come over with his high jumpers or pole vaulters. When I was at Solanco, I'd go out to practice at night, and there'd be more pole vaulters from other schools there than our school, because Leah Peter Strasburg sent their pole vaulters up and I'm not trying to blow my own horn, believe me. It's just that I had knowledge of the event, and a lot of coaches did. So the coach from CV said, "Can my vaulters come over and vault with your guys?" And it's funny because one year, I had 3 guys jump anywhere from 13 to 13.9. It's back in the 70s. And there was a big write-up on them in the paper about these guys are going to probably sweep the league meet. They're going to probably maybe even sweep the district meet. 3 guys from the same school all jumping 13.9, how great this was. And last year, I still keep in touch with so many guys, and I got in touch with all 3 of those guys. And I said, I just want you to know, you all jumped between 13 and 13.9. And I said, there's a girl so this year that jumped 13.9.
Wow. Great. Well, the way things are going, we're going to have a female run a 4-minute mile.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yes.
What was amazing. What about the end of your career and the accolades? You're a member of the Lancaster Hall of Fame. What do you think about your legacy and what you went through in all these decades of coaching?
I hope I made a difference because that's why I got into coaching. I remember when out in the corner of the where 222 goes down past our high school, Route 222. There's a great big sign out there, brick, Solanco High School. And I took my whole team out there and I told them to sit down by the sign. And I said, now, you know what I want? I said, when people go by this sign, people are driving on 222 and they look and they say, oh, that's Solanco High School. That's where all those good track teams come from. And that's where all those good cross country teams come from. I said, that's what I would like. So I'm hoping that could still be part of my legacy when people go by there and think, oh man, they had some great teams in the 70s, or of course they'd be probably too old to drive by now. But another thing I always told my kids, I promise you, if you do what I ask you to do, no coach will ever outwork me. No coach will know more than me. I will go to every clinic. I will read every book. I will watch every film. I will watch every video. I will do everything I can so that no coach will beat us because he knows more than me. And I made that promise to my first teams. And I tried to live up to that all the while that I was coaching. I just tried to be prepared. And anytime there was a new technique, when the spin came out in the shot, and I went to clinics, I used to take my throwers Sunday mornings all the way up to Iona College, north of New York City, and Tony Niclario was the track coach there. He made his mark at Essex Catholic High School in New Jersey, where one year he had 4 throwers throw over 60 feet in the shot put. And his javelin thrower broke the national high school record through 251. He was the best clinician I ever heard, and I learned more from him. I said, how'd you ever find these guys? He said, Clario said, all the kids came to me and they said, you got to get, and I'm trying to remember his name now, you got to get him out for track. He's a 12-story guy. And I said, a 12-story guy? He said, yeah. He could throw a stone to break a window on 12 floors up. He was legendary in that area around Jersey City and, an area around there. He was a great clinician. And I would go up, I would take my guys up to watch. He would have all these, because he was the head of the U.S. Olympic Throwing Committee. He was the head of the U.S. Olympic team for throws. And I would go up there, and on a Sunday morning, we would watch these guys throw. And I'm looking out there, and there's Al Oder throwing. There's Jay Sylvester throwing. There's Plunkett throwing. These guys are the gold medal winners, and they're throwing, and he's filming them. And he said, now, look, I can't tell any of your kids, or I can't work with any of your kids. He said, that's against the NCAA rules. He said, but you can come and watch, and you can listen. That's fine. So he films all these guys. He's filming Al Oder, for God's sake. He's already won 4 gold medals. And he said, then after they throw, he takes them inside and they go over the film session. They look at it, he breaks it down. He said, you can come in and watch that if you want to, but I can't physically help your kids, or neither can any of these guys. It was a 6-hour drive, and we go up every Sunday morning. We leave the school at 4:00 and get up there and just listen to him. And he was the greatest clinician I ever heard. I could learn more from him about the throws in an hour than I could in my whole lifetime, I think. He was great.
Coach, in addition to being an artist, you kept records of everything. And
Yes.
what about notebooks? Tell me about the notebooks that you gave to your athletes.
Yeah, I gave every kid a notebook, which had the results of every meet, but it also had the result of every time that they ran, all the heights they jumped or whatever, all the everything, and a complete summation of the whole season. And I had pictures. That one of the photographers for the local paper, Corryville paper, took a lot of pictures all year, and she gave to me at the end of the year. And then I would photograph and put these in these notebooks. And I used to do a thing, which really, this was a neat thing. It created a lot of interest in it. I broke it down: hurdling, sprinting, distance running, jumping, and throwing. And what I would do is, who got the greatest percentage of points available? Like I say, in this meet, 36 points were available, and the jumpers got 32 of them. And I kept that every year. Part of my, after the meet speech the next day, I would say, oh, incidentally, the throwers won the percentage award again. And they would cheer and they would yell like crazy. It became a real thing where they really competed because they wanted to win that. I put that in the notebook, and I put all the results, and it went to states. And all the results from like the league meet and stuff like that. So I still have a lot of those.
Well, my personal career, high school in Western Pennsylvania, great life. It was a great little school, and we had a good team. We went to the state meet every year in both
Oh
cross
yeah, I
country.
remember that. Yes, absolutely, you did.
We won districts 2 out of 3. We lost 1 year. My junior year, I ran well. I won the conference meet. I got a state medal, and then I had family issues. Kind of life fell apart. So Jim Lambert ended up being our number 1 runner. He won districts, finished second to Cliff.
Uh-huh.
But it was a great thing to grow up. But my junior year, the year I actually did, our coach quit. He was the driver in, and he's, you got to pay me. I don't know if they weren't paying him at all. So we had no coach, and we said, my gosh, we just won. We won districts in cross country track. We have to have a team. Just
Yeah.
find somebody. We'll coach ourselves. So we just got a baseball player, and he said, I don't know anything. He said, you just need to go on the bus with us to the meets. We'll take care of it.
Yeah.
I think, oh my God, if we would have run more than 25 miles a week, we probably would have been better.
Yeah.
I mean, the decade was just a great time to do all that. Now, when F&M, did Humbo go there? Did you have him?
Yes, he did. No, but I did not coach him. No, I did not
Okay.
coach there until I think I went there in 80. I think I coached there from till 84, from about that age. I actually went 2 years to Stevens Trade School, which is the junior college in Lancaster, and I coached there a couple of years. And then Coach I asked me if I'd come to F&M. But Hobo,
Yeah.
I just graduated.
Yeah, I remember talking to him at the state meet his senior year and saying, you're going to go Division I. What are you going to do with Ronnie? He's like, I want music. So what motivated him to go to F&M was the music more than the good great running career there. But
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. And he was there with some other good runners, and they had some good teams. In fact, not the boys, but the women won the national championship one of those years in the mid 70s. But Hobo did very well there. Yeah, he had a great year. Coach Inaselli was a really good coach.
when I started doing this, I ran against Mark Muggleton my freshman year. I was right with him for 3 laps, and then when he was still at Edinburgh before he went Division I. So I knew those guys, but I just had the 1 year. But they also had Jeff Foster,
Yeah.
who at Edinburgh then. It's interesting. After college, I left the country. I was overseas all my life. When I got back, but I've caught back with these guys, and it is amazing the lives. Jeff Foster just won his 7th state powerlifting title. And
Oh, really? Wow. Yeah.
He has 84 state records as a
Oh, my
master
God.
power lifter.
Powerlifting. Yeah.
I was in the wrong sport the whole time. He was a state champion. And I was in the wrong sport. I should have been a lifter my whole life, which is crazy.
Talking about Western PA and the good runners, the boy I told you about he was my number 1 cross country runner. He was the number 1 kid I had to try, and he was the first folder to go 14 feet. He ran cross country, and he won District 9. And we were going down to the state meet. Now, here I am as a coach. How do I say to a kid, look, I know you can't win this, but I said, look, Joe, I said, if you run smart, you can medal today. I said, but you got to run smart. I said, you have to understand 3 of the top runners in the country are going to run in this race today. Because it was Sherco, but Sherco, I think Bethel Park, North Allegheny had a kid that year. These guys were running 4:12, 4:11 back then. And the guy from State College, he won the half, and he ran in State College's 2-mile relay that year. And it ran, I think, the fastest time in the nation at the state meet. And he won the mile, and he won the half mile. And I said, they're all going to run. I said, these guys are the best runners in the nation. You're basically a pole vaulter. And so anyhow, we're on the white course at Penn State. The gun goes off, and you run down a long hill at the beginning, and it's pretty long. It's not steep, but it's long, and it's downhill. And then you get to the bottom, you make a right-hand turn, and you go across the bottom of the course. Then you make another right, and you go up the other side of the course, which is uphill the whole way. Right in the middle of that hill, there's a grove of pine trees. And so I'm running in the course to see him go across the bottom. And all the coaches are saying, who's that kid? Who's that kid in the red uniform? Who's that kid in the red uniform? He's way out ahead. He's way out ahead. And I look up, I thought, oh my God, it's Joe. I said, what? I just told him You take it easy. So I'm watching them and they get to the other side and they make the right hand turn and they start up the hill and he's still in the lead. They run into that grove of pine trees and I'm watching him. He goes in there, he's probably 25 meters ahead. And I'm looking and he never comes out. I'm looking pretty soon. Everybody starts coming out. Everybody starts coming out. So I run over there as fast as I can. And I run in and he's laying in there on his back going, hyperventilating everything. And he said to me, and that coach, he said, I shot for the moon, but I just came up a little short. I said, Joe, a little short. You didn't even make it to the halfway mark.
That's great.
But oh yeah, those runners that year were great. Yeah, they even had a couple of them went to Pitt, and they were like 4-minute milers in college then. I'm 4. Yeah, Steve Gentry. That's who that was the girls' coach at St. College, and he was the guy. He was a big help to me in my career when I was coaching women. He was always so encouraging and everything, and guys too. But yeah, up till that time, he was the best distance runner ever in Pennsylvania. He ran like 154, 153, 154 in the anchor leg of that 2-mile relay. Then he won the mile, and then he won the half mile too. And that was one day meet. He did them all in one day.
Yeah. That was just before Dave Felice.
Yes, before Felice. Yeah, now Cliff ran against Felice. The oddity about Cliff Weimer has our school record in the mile. Still, and it's 4:16. He was a better 2-miler. He ran 9:06. He had the state record for 29 years in the 2-mile. And in the early 70s, we ran a meet up in Wilkes-Barre at Myers High School after Agnes. Remember when Agnes came through, everybody, all the 3 high schools in Wilkes-Barre were flooded out. So instead of each building back their own facility, they pulled the money and they built that big stadium at Myers. They had an artificial football field and an artificial track back in the early 70s when nobody had that. And we went up there for the Iceberg Olympics, they called it. The mile run came up and it was 6 degrees. And Cliff came up to me and he said, do I have to take my sweats off? And I said, well, yeah, you got to take your sweats off. And that's before like tights and all the stuff they had today to stay warm. And 3 guys, Dave Felice, Cliff Weimer, and a kid from Bishop Hoban named Lyons, ran the mile. They all ran 4:16 or under. And Cliff was 3rd in that race. Dave Felice outkicked him, and so did the kid at Lyons from Bishop Hoban. Nobody can believe me when I say he set the school record in a mile in 6 degrees.
Dave Felice went back and became coach at State College.
Yes.
After his career as a firefighter down in Texas.
Uh-huh.
Did you know anything about that?
No, I did not.
Do you remember the story of baby Jessica?
Yes.
Dave went down there. He was one of the firemen that had to go in the parallel tunnel for hours and go down there. And he said, my fitness is the reason I could do that.
Oh, yeah.
I interviewed him and he tells the story of the baby Jessica rescue. But it firemen, and you have somebody like that who's a great half-miler, 2-miler, cross-country.
Yeah.
And he was hurt. He couldn't run his senior year in cross country. He missed that.
Yeah, he was hurt. Yes.
But he was able to do that life-saving, life-changing thing for baby Jessica because of fitness and his
wow. That's an awesome story. I never knew that.
Coach Harrington, it's great to talk to you. I think obviously a lot of people learned a lot of things from you and you did change a lot of lives. Let me just ask you about your art. Are you an artist yourself apart from teaching?
Actually, when I retired, I opened an art gallery in Lancaster. I'm a partner in an art gallery called the Red Raven Art Company. So now I paint, and we've been open 18 years, actually. I started right after I retired. I was showing in another gallery in Lancaster, and then they closed. So myself and my partner, who was the art teacher at St. Peter Strasburg, we opened the gallery. And we're a little bit atypical as far as an art gallery is concerned because we were both teachers. So we wanted to keep contact with students. So we have a scholarship program in our art gallery. We give 4 scholarships away a year, starting at $1,000, and one is $1,000 their freshman year, $2,000 their sophomore year, $3,000 their junior year, and $4,000 their senior year. And we've had a number of kids, and we have a portfolio contest. That's how we pick the winners. So we still have contact with students, and So that's what I do now. I just do my own artwork.
What's your favorite medium and what is your subject matter here?
Mostly acrylic landscapes. But I also did a whole series on musicians or singers, and not portraits, but I would buy their sheet music and I would draw it out on the canvas, and I would put the notes right where they really go, and I would put the lyrics in between the lines. And then I would put a lot of collage of that particular artist. Like if I did Elvis or the Beatles or whoever. And I sold a ton of those. And now I'm starting a whole new series with with two things I really like, music and cars. What I'm doing is I'm doing a whole new series, and I'm doing songs that have cars in the titles, like Mustang Sally or Little Red Corvette or the Beach Boys. Man, they have so many. My little GTO, which the GTO was the first car I ever bought after I graduated from college, was a GTO. And so I'm going to start these, and they'll be for my next big show in the gallery, which is 2025, which is really only a year away.
What about painting runners? Is there any track and field?
Never done that. But I've never been a figurative painter. But I have done, oddly enough, picture the cross country courses.
Yeah, okay, cool. All right, Coach. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Hopefully we can find a way to use Facebook and get a lot of your athletes and colleagues and coaches to hear from you. It sounds like you're doing great, and can be on the lookout 2025 for this new exhibit you have.
Yes. Yeah. 2025.
All right. Thanks, Coach.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks for your time, Coach. It's been great talking to you.
Yeah. And I love the old waffle trainers behind us, man.
Yeah, those my pairs upstairs in the closet. I did run. We had a grass country course at IUP my freshman year. I won the JV Penn Ohio meet those shoes.
Yeah, great.
All right, Coach. Talk to you later.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate this. This was fun.
It was. Bye.
All right, bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.